Hello and welcome to this World Economic Forum discussion. I'm Karen Cho, co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box. I very much appreciate your time today. We're having a discussion that has been lined up for a very pressing topic as we talk about the future: data collaboration, lessons from the field. Companies, countries, institutions, governments are increasingly relying on technology, which in turn is generating a trove of data. By numbers, by 2025, individuals, companies around the world will produce an estimated 463 exabytes of data each day. Already, some have deployed data-driven strategies to achieve sustainable development goals. But there is more that can be achieved by harnessing the power of data across domains and countries. From the ocean to specific sectors, for instance, healthcare and agriculture, to data that can address climate change. Today, we're here to talk about how data collaboration can be amplified and replicated for public good. Well, just a reminder, if you do want to engage on some of the social forums, you can use the hashtag for the meeting, hashtag WEF23. Let me introduce you to our panelists today. Kono Taro, who is Minister for Digital Transformation of Japan. Kimberly Mathisen, Chief Executive Officer, Hub Ocean. Anurag Jain, Secretary, Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, India. And Shamina Singh, President, Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, Executive Vice President, Sustainability, Mastercard USA, Young Global Leader. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, first up, let's just sketch out where we are with data collaboration today. Mr. Jain, if I can turn to you, what proven examples of data sharing have you witnessed so far that you think can be deployed and be amplified across countries and domains?
Thank you, all the fellow panelists and guests here. About 8-9 years back, this story started. We started a very major program for comprehensive financial inclusion called Jan Dhan. In India, there were only about 35% of the families had a bank account. In a short period of about 3 to 4 months, we were able to open bank accounts which were online. And we came up with a remittance or a transfer instrument called UPI, Unified Payment Interface. It was basically based on open platform structure, so everybody could collaborate. Like before that, every payment system in the world was a closed loop system. So for example, you are on a Google Pay and you want to make payment to someone who is on WhatsApp Pay, you can't do it. It has to be on the same loop. But what UPI does, it gives open APIs to people who can actually in turn connect. So from a Google Pay to WhatsApp Pay, you can pay. So this was the first big transformational thing. Thereafter, India started on the digital journey, the digital transformation. So this philosophy of open systems, open platforms, open APIs has got ingrained into this. So from unified payment structure, we moved to various other initiatives. But what has come out as India Stack, it has 3 basic layers. One is identity layer. Almost about 1.4 billion people in the country have got biometrics and iris mapped to a unique identity number, which can identify a person with the press of a button. You put your thumb, within 15 seconds you get a response, yes, no, it is the same person or not. You have a payment system, which I just described. I described that in a little detail because I was fortunate to have designed and implemented that at that point of time. And third is what we call data empowerment protection architecture, which is basically a paperless and consent-based layer. So it is not that your data can be shared by someone without your consent. In all our architecture, what we have built in, if my data has to be shared, some OTP comes to me. When I say yes, I put that OTP number, it goes back, and then only the data can be shared. So this is consent and paperless. So with these 3 layers, lot of applications, almost 12 major projects have been undertaken. I talked about UPI. We have brought whole of health on this. India was able to actually vaccinate 2 billion doses of vaccination during COVID. How was it possible? How was this ramping up possible? Because each and every person was traced through this unique identity and his phone number. So every person we were able to hold this vaccination program in less than a year for 2 billion doses, 2 doses each person. Because of all this, where the total economy has been growing at the rate of 7% for the last 1 decade or so, the digital economy in the country has been growing at a rate of 15 to 16%. So that is what has created the India opportunity in almost every sector. This has laid the foundation for that. We have got health records. You get yourself treated in any hospital in the country. There is a linking factor, which is called Ayushman Bharat. Ayushman Bharat is a Hindi word, which is name of the program, health record. So when a doctor wants to see you, it is all disaggregated data. But because of this common link factor, every data related to you is pulled in with your consent. It is available to you for a while when the doctor is treating you. After that, wherever it is residing, it's over. So there's no integrated structure which is there, a monstrous database maze. So it's all disaggregated databases. So this is the way we are going forward. We have done the same thing in the logistics space. There are 7 Government of India departments dealing with 32 different platforms which are some way connected, like the rail system, the airport system, airways system, the shipping system, customs, the foreign trade systems. So all these 32 platforms have been put through open APIs. So the private companies are actually using these and creating user interfaces which are very user-friendly. So this is a game changer in the logistics space. Another, which I call the new kid on the block, which is just coming of age, is Open Network for Digital Commerce. This actually makes e-commerce interoperable by unbundling and making it interoperable. It's an open network. We have come out with a beacon protocol, which creates an open protocol. So effectively in e-commerce, you have 4 layers. You have a seller app, you have a buyer app, you have a payment system, and a logistic thing. So because of this beacon protocol, which is on which each of these platforms are residing, so the network system is there. So anyone who is only in buyer space or someone who is only in logistic space can plug in, and rest of the ecosystem can come from other collaborative partners. So this is going to be the real game changer to my mind.
Right.
The oligopolies of the world, which almost every country is grappling with, this is the right kind of a solution because the entry barriers go down substantially. So there are many such things. 12 or 13 major projects have already been undertaken. I've just described some of them. And all of these are available on open government data structure. We have got almost about 66,000 data sets available on about 44,000 APIs which are available for people to integrate and use it.
Mr. Jain, thank you very much for detailing the state of play in India, the digital economy. This is fascinating. Minister, let me turn to you. I want to get a glimpse into something that you've been watching, very much different economies. We talk about Japan and India, but what have you witnessed that you think is a great example of how we can amplify data collaboration?
Well, a good example is COVID vaccine. When we look at the vaccine certificate, there are so many standards globally. And some country, they cannot read our vaccine certificate. We're not going to be able to read some of their certificate. So as people travel, there are quite a few forgery of the certificate. And that is one small thing, but there are a lot of incoherence over the data going on. So we definitely need to create some kind of data regime globally. But if you look at the global situation, Europe is quite tough on privacy with GDPR. The United States is like a wild, wild west. Anything goes. And there's China and other authoritarian regime that government has a monopoly over the data. So what we are trying to do is, well, we are hosting G7 this year in Japan. And if we look back, 2019, the late Prime Minister Abe sort of proposed the idea, concept of DFFT, Data Free Flow Trust. So we would like to operationalize DFFT this year. And in order to do that, we are hoping to create a new international body with a permanent secretariat. And we would like to operationalize DFFT.
Minister, thank you. We'll follow up on this in a moment. But Kimberly, let me turn to you first. Hub Ocean is a non-profit company organisation aimed at becoming a central point for data collected from the ocean, data that can be used to generate ocean health. Just talk to us about the coordination that you're witnessing on this project and whether it's useful as we take a look at economies and collaboration across the world.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Hello, everyone. At Hub Ocean, what we are fundamentally doing already is building on amazing work and collaboration around ocean data that's already existed for over a couple of 100 years. The World Ocean Database is a really good example of this. That started with collaboration between just one nation itself, and then it's expanded. It has data in it about the ocean, temperatures and salinities and wave action and so forth, back to Captain Cook's voyage of 1772, I believe is the right date. So there's a level of aggregation of ocean data which we must build on, and it represents the best assets that we have so far. But let it be said that this data that's oftentimes just sitting there waiting to be animated, mixed with other data and employed is actually often really hard to get at. It's in formats which are not very usable and accessible. It's very difficult for ocean scientists or people without data scientist skills to mix that data, particularly with other kinds of data that might not be open today, like industry data, which is generally closed. That's the model we've operated under today. We know that we're in a time where we're going to build out an extreme amount of things in our ocean, right? Wind energy is one of those things that's going to take a lot of space in the ocean. And for that build out, we are going to build in an ocean which is under tremendous pressure today. And the data gaps that we still have are frankly enormous. The climate models are so hungry for those data, right? Industry opportunities to collaborate, like shipping, figuring out where they should put green corridors in the world in order to get the risks down between those who would provide fuel and those who would buy technology for new engines on ships. It's full of risk. Green corridors is a very data-hungry process, right? Scientific models, governments who need to map and manage and make fundamental decisions in their oceans, data-hungry processes. So what we're trying to do is bridge those silos. And it's certainly going to be a long journey, though we're absolutely seeing successes and movement and transparency forced by regulation, but voluntary transparency. Some days it's very, very heartening to do what I do because you just feel, oh my gosh, there's breakthroughs in understanding that are so fundamental. But it's very hard work, and it's going to take a long time to shift these mindsets fundamentally to much more open data that we can all participate in building on and together with a healthy ocean.
Kimberly, I thought the challenges would be land borders, but you fleshed out plenty more there. We'll come back to some of the points in a moment. But Shamina, let me get you into the conversation. You're part of the philanthropic hub at Mastercard, leveraging data for social impact. Just share with us a project perhaps that you're working on that really suggests that there can be data collaboration across domains, across countries.
Well, thank you for having me, and hello to all the panelists. Yes, so I think it's a really exciting moment in data and data collaboration. One of the concepts that I'd like to talk about that's a little bit different but supports Kim's notion of the difficulty around absorbing the data and analyzing the data is that there is this gap. We call it an information inequality gap, but it's basically the difference between the data haves and the data have-nots. There is a bifurcation of organizations who are able to build quickly to take advantage of all that the data can provide for decision making, and those that can't. And so the area that we have really invested in is building the field of data science for social impact. What does that look like? It means that we have to build capacity of social sector organizations and other organizations to realize the power of their own data. And that is what's going to unlock the potential, I think, of all of the work that's happening here. What does that look like? We created an organization called data.org, along with the Rockefeller Foundation, whose essential component is to make sure that around the world, organizations were building the data science capacity for everyone, everywhere. In fact, we're building a hub in India. We're building data capacity hubs all around the world. We have 6 that we're building. Those hubs will become centralized resources for anyone, any social sector organization, to build their capacity. So we're trying to create these nodes all around the world to build data capacity. That's one example. I have many more, but that's a really important example that we have worked on right now.
I want to pivot to one of the big issues, which is around security. And Minister Kono, you are, as you mentioned, overseeing the G7 digital ministerial meeting in Japan this year. A pressing topic is the extent to which nations are willing to share data, given some of the challenges. I mean, you've held the portfolio of defense and foreign policy. The war in Ukraine, saber rattling by China over Taiwan, other big issues of security. Does this stop the ability to press ahead with data collaboration?
I don't think so. Right now, what we trade over the border is not just goods and services, but data goes back and forth across the border. So we need to keep on doing this for the economy. Yes, security is important, and the privacy is also important. And we need to make sure that all the business, all the government, all the civil society are able to send the data back and forth. But as I said, the Wild West in the United States and the GDPR in Europe, it's not going to be able to be convergence on tomorrow. So what we need to do, or say SME in Japan, if they wanted to do something in Europe, if they want to operate in Europe, there's going to be a EU law, national law, regulations, guideline, official Q&A, and rules on data changes so frequently. So big corporation could hire lawyer or law firm and go into the bottom of the regulation. But the SME not going to be able to have a capacity to do that. So what we need to do is to increase the transparency. And we wanted to create a global inventory of the regulation so that even the SME could know what they have to do for certain industry, for certain country. So we just wanted to make sure that we could create that field. At the same time, we need to have security for data, and we need to be able to protect privacy and security from the cyber attacks. So that's something we have to do in sync.
Shamina, I want to get you back in here as you talk about these nodes that you're building out across the world for data capacity. How do you navigate the geopolitics where a state actor might want access to some of this information for security purposes? A country may not want to share the information because they are concerned it poses a threat to national security. And then the regulation issues, the uneven playing field that the minister just spells out. How does it impact the decisions about where you locate facilities?
So this is on the data.org side. So it's less about the Mastercard nodes, and we're doing a lot with India and in Japan to make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements to ensure that a digital India is successful, and Japan's leadership on the G7 side around digitization is also successful. But this point is around harmonization of regulation, which is something that I think this panel would all agree is something that's really important, and interoperability is the other part that's really, really important. On the node side, on the data.org side, the purpose of the nodes is to build capacity for social sector organizations so they don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of dealing with their own data. And so it's less about state actors and security. The one thing I would say, though, is about cybersecurity, which Minister raised. One of the things we know is that for small businesses, 6 months after they experience a cyber attack, they generally close. And so if we don't figure out the cybersecurity system for all of these data flows, all of the digital work that's the work we have to do around digitization, is really making sure not only do we harmonize the regulation, but that we offer an ability to make sure that the cybersecurity tools are in place for all of these.
Mr. Jain, I want to come back to you. India, pivotal role this year, G20 presidency. Yet one member of the G20, Russia, is facing diplomatic isolation because of the war in Ukraine. How do you push ahead with an agenda on data collaboration when you have this geopolitical threat?
That is something which I personally feel that India has been able to navigate this geopolitical challenge pretty reasonably well. We have pursued an independent foreign policy, and we have treated, if you look at what happened in Indonesia, there were concerns that the leaders' communique might not come out. But the last bit consultations, where India played a very crucial role, was very important, and the crucial role it was that the leader communique came out. So I think India has a trust factor of most of the countries, and it's again a collaborative thing. You just can't say, I'll get it done. You have to take people along if you want to work in a collaborative framework. So this is another thing on the agenda. We have given our clear points, what we want to drive, and I think those points are such where there will be collaborative framework which will come through.
The other threat is how governments treat data. We were just touching on China before, and authoritarian governments, their view on how they can harness data for security or national security and managing populations. Do you really believe that the United States would be willing to share its data on Americans across borders with the Chinese, who have a very different way of treating data?
No, you have to understand the way you want to treat. Like our data protection bill. Initially, when we came out with this bill in 2019, there were a lot of feedback from the people. And we did not push ahead and convert it into a law. We went into stakeholder consultation once again. And now the new bill has been drafted, which has been put for public consultation once again. It has come out with certain clear principles. First is, before I get into the principles, when I talked in the answer to the first question, I talked about disaggregated database. There's no one single database which holds the whole data. There was a huge challenge in India by various people on the Aadhaar. Aadhaar is a unique identity layer I talked about. But how do we function? Aadhaar is a very simple thing. It has just the iris, biometrics, and a number, and my name and my address. Nothing else. How is that number is connected and seeded into all other databases which are residing separately. If there is a health database, it has just one more field added to this. If it's a financial database, it has one more field added to it, which is the identity number. So when I need something, I pull in data at that particular point of time related to only that particular record. So there is no single data which gets created which has problem of getting leaked out. So this is the open philosophy, disaggregated databases philosophy, which we are pursuing. So now if it is based on principles, like the principles which are part of the draft bill which has been put out for another public consultation, we talk about 7 principles. Principle of usage. You can take data only for a particular use. We talk about the principle of purpose. It can be used only for the purpose for which you have taken the consent. You can't use it for something else. Principle of minimization. You ask for the minimum possible data for your use. The principle of accuracy. You reasonably update and upgrade the data so that accurate data is available with the system. Storage limitation. You store it only for the purpose, for the time duration you need it. Once that purpose is over, release the database. It should not reside in your database. Then the person, like what we have done, there's a data principal and there's a data fiduciary. We have divided it into 2. If it is my data or my business data, I am the data principal. I'll command the control over it. And other person who is utilizing for my data is a data fiduciary. So he has to follow these principles. And then this fiduciary has to build in reasonable safeguard. And the last part is someone who is processing and using it for a particular purpose, he is accountable for the security of the data. So with these principles, I think data sharing can happen.
Kimberly, let me turn to you, because geopolitics, regulation, slightly different ballgame as we're talking about the high seas and the ocean. So just weigh in on the topic.
Actually, I think to complement what's been said already, the oceans are notoriously really difficult to govern, right? Because you have all levels of governance, including the high seas, where it's sort of everybody's and nobody's out there, right? And so a lot of the work in treaties are aimed at solving those difficulties. But I maybe want to focus on the art of the possible, because there is so much terrain that we need to go into, and we can go into, despite different regulatory frameworks and despite different levels of willingness to share from industry and despite all of our cultural differences and industry differences and so forth. And I would point to the finance industry as an example. Right now, there are different regulations that are wanting to take shape and happen in the EU and America and other parts of the world that are pushing forward, for example, trying to help understand how any company's assets do good or harm to biodiversity or to our nature. Think about that for a minute. If you're a company that has ships sailing the seas, there's no standard right now and very little transparency on what any given ship does or doesn't do to the biodiversity of the environment. Do they even sail through or motor through marine protected areas? That usually is a bad idea. How often do they do that? Are they slowing down when they get a receiver message that says there's whales migrating in the area? Hundreds of whales are smashed by ships and die every year. And just a little speed reduction by these ships in a specific place in the world can save 90% of them. But which ships respond to the call to take their foot off the gas just a little bit, and which ones blow through anyway? We don't have any visibility on any of that. And when the finance industry is now really doing the work to lean in to try to say the world wants to direct its assets to good behavior, well, how do you do that? And so we work together with Green Digital Finance Alliance and a number of others right now to develop the kinds of products that I'm talking about, to go into big data exercises like using AIS satellite data. Satellite data has come huge and far, right? And can now help us understand a lot of these things. And we can reward good behaviors. And we can partner with the finance industry to reward financially those good behaviors, or penalize the bad ones and bring accountability as an action instrument to get faster change for greening.
Shamina, as we talk about greater data collaboration here, industry unlocking some of its data that can be used by other organizations, how do we encourage industry to share that data?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question, and again, sort of building on, I guess, Kim's point, which is the art of the possible. My job at Mastercard is to use the assets of the firm for social and environmental impact. A big asset of the firm is data and data analytics. And one of the ways that we have worked to ensure that we are working to provide tools that create a competition for the race to the top are using things like creating the inclusive growth score, which is an example of a tool where we take multiple open data sources or government sources and things like that, combine them with proprietary Mastercard data, and create inclusive growth score analytics so that cities in the United States down to the census tract level can compare their inclusive growth scores with other cities in the United States. And it allows decision makers, mayors in this case, to see that maybe their St. Louis is more like a city in the western United States than it is a city right next to St. Louis. In the same way, we have worked in India, actually. We just working with the Prime Minister's office, we worked to create something called the Social Progress Initiative, where we worked with an organization to use, again, open data sources to create the analytics necessary to understand what the social progress indicators are for every state in India, and then a number of cities at the local level. So I guess my point is we can provide, we can share all the data, we can open up all the data. Those are all the conversations. We have to do it in a principled way, as Mr. Jain has said. But I think the other point to make is that we have to have the ability to actually do the analytics and actually make sense of any of this data. That's been the big lesson that I've learned at the Center for Inclusive Growth, is that when we've talked to anybody about accessing Mastercard data, and we've talked to many academics, we have data fellows, we have the systems in place to do it, the big lesson is always, yes, you want access to the data, fine, but then we have to help navigate. What are the analytics? What are the data sets? What are the things that they need to actually understand the issues that they're trying to study? And that's why I think the capacity side of the equation is so important.
What safeguards do we need to put around the analytics? I mean, we hand the data over to a central body or a particular country. What safeguards do we have around that?
Well, I think on the analytics side, what you're creating is the product, right, for them. And so in India's case, as an example, on the social progress imperative, we worked to create the we worked with in this case, an academic institution and an NGO to create a product that said, here's the analytics already formulated. And so you can use it if you'd like to make decisions around that. If there are other data formulations and other data analytics, we can work on those as well.
Minister Connor, can I come back to you as we talk about progress and not just declarations from countries that they want more collaboration, but to genuine action? What has to happen next? You mentioned a bit around regulation. Is that a stumbling block? We need to have common standards at this point.
Well, what we need is trust and security. If people don't trust the receiving side, then you see the rise of protectionism, data protectionism, or data localization. So we need to increase the trust so that data could flow across the border. And then we hope to have one regulation, but that is not possible. So we need to really create interoperability. I think that's the buzzword for now. And internet is now increasingly becoming like a splinternet. And some authoritarian regimes are trying to reach out to the global south, providing their way of data management. So I think the G7 need to take leadership with like-minded country to provide the alternative to that, so that we could create some kind of data regime with maybe different rules, but with transparency and interoperability. And that's what we need to do.
Minister, this sounds a lot like a form of a trading bloc, but in data sharing, that it's only really like-minded countries that play the same game on geopolitics that we trust, that can really enter into this exclusive club on data collaboration. That's not enough, is it, if we truly want to have some sort of societal benefit and collaboration?
Yes, we don't want to create the club of G7 or just like-minded countries. We definitely need to reach out to the whole economy. So we need to create some kind of decision-making body for outcome-oriented. And then we need to include everyone who are willing to go along with it. Then data start flowing each ways, or many ways, and not only the government, society, business, but society could benefit out of it.
What do you say to industries that are reluctant to share their data at this point? They want to keep perhaps commercial secrets very much to themselves. They don't want that to be shared. Any access point that they can provide for a rival could be to their detriment.
Well, we need to protect privacy, security, and the intellectual property right. But data is not like just other goods and services. If you import oil, no one else could use that oil. But if you get the data, the others still could use the same data. And if we add more to it, we get better knowledge. So fundamentally, the flow of data each way would be beneficial to everyone. That's the difference between oil and gas. If someone has it, no one else could use it. But data, I think if we share more, everyone could benefit more.
Mr. Jain, Kimberly.
Yeah, but that's a fantastic point, and the work that we do all the time is to find these propositions which are win-win. For example, if you take oil and gas companies opening up their data, why? To accelerate wind energy build-out. Everyone who has anything to do with energy right now seems to be concerned with compressing the timeline so that we can get 40 times more renewable energy built in the ocean fast, right? We need that to happen. The data that we're building on, that countries are building on to have insights to where should we build, how should we build, which species do we need to take care of, it's painstakingly closed, right? And the processes that are designed right now could benefit from very small tweaks sometimes and create massive opportunities for everyone to win instead of competing on acquiring information in the North Sea, which has 7 countries participating, all of them doing it in own individual processes. Every company bidding themselves in own individual little plots of ocean. The fish don't know if they're swimming in Netherlands or Norway or Ireland or UK waters. They're just trying to do their best to stay alive up there in the North Sea, right? And we're plopping down things and building things all over. This is so ripe for better collaboration, and the industry has so much to benefit too. You've got to find propositions where the industry benefits. You can find them. We get more mature on digital every day, and that should be that we can come a little more out of our comfort zones, right? And again, imagine the art of the possible, right? And scope out these areas where there are win-win benefits. We can find them and we must find them.
Mr. Jain, after your comments earlier too, there seems to be 2 different parts of the universe when it comes to the digital economy. One where you have economies that are becoming highly connected, more efficient at how they run their populations thanks to technology, and how they then pivot to sharing that data across borders, versus other developing and emerging markets that are not even digitized to an extent at this point. How do you share your lessons in both directions? One, to bring up other economies to match what you're doing in India, and 2, to share that data across borders?
First, as I said, in the G20 thing, what we have already offered is the digital public infrastructure that we have actually offered it to the world. The countries, the developing countries, other emerging markets, whoever needs it, we are willing to share our knowledge base. And it is part of the 3 major points for G20 what we have offered. The other 2 being the cybersecurity, as Honorable Minister just mentioned, security and trust, they are the most important issues. And third, we have also said is the digital skilling, because there comes the real thing, because there are a lot of people who are excluded. Mm-hmm. So we are looking at it from an inclusivity point of view. And the way we have driven in our country, inclusiveness comes automatically. What we have done is basically, again, going back to the same point, by using open architectures, open networks, open platforms, we have democratized it. So entry barriers are very low. The new player in business can come and plug only his part. Rest of the ecosystem is provided by the public digital interface. So that is why a new player is able to survive. And that is why India's economy in the digital area is growing so fast. That is a different philosophy we have followed. On the data sharing part, Honorable Minister has rightly put the concerns. So it has to come from the principles. The principles I just laid out. Because when initially India also had gone the same way, that you can't take our data out. But then but since it's a democratic country, we engage with our businesses directly, listen to them and decide what is to be done. When we understood their concerns, we did not push forward with the same bill. We changed it completely. And now it's a principle-based thing which has come out from, so it's something similar to what we have done in e-commerce. It's again a principle-based thing. We have just unbundled, so each part, and it made it interoperable. And it is based on an open network system. So this is the way to go forward. And I guess if people have started looking up to India on India's success story, developed world was there already ahead of us. but it's a matter of the last 1 decade that India has just caught up. And since we have pursued a different path, therefore we have been able to catch up so fast, and we are growing still. Other day, I should not say such a thing in a public conversation, but one of the ambassadors of a country had come and met me, of a developed, one of the top bracket companies. He said, after the interministerial meeting where I was part of it, assisting my minister, he actually told me that we have understood we are 15 years behind India in technology. And it is one of the topmost countries. I said, no, sir, you are mistaken. You are not behind us. Behind means you can catch up. You are on a different path, we are on a different path.
Which highlights the difference we're seeing across the globe, doesn't it? I want to give the audience something tangible to take away. And Shamina, if I can get you to kick it off first, just talk to us about one concrete step you would like to see to ensure that there is data collaboration that is fully scaled to meet this ambition.
Yeah, I think it's where I started, which is in order to have true data collaboration, you have to have data equality from the supply, demand, from public and private, from social and all of the social and other sectors. And so I would just encourage us to really ensure that we are creating capacity, building the field of data science for social impact so that we have data equity across sectors. And I would encourage you to visit data.org to learn more about it.
And Minister Connor, let me turn to you. A concrete step you would like to see so we amplify data collaboration.
Well, in order to increase interoperability, we definitely need input from the private sector. We need to know what's really going on in the real society, real world. And then we need to utilize emerging technology like private enhancing technology to increase the interoperability. So what we are trying to do is we are having G7 meeting in April in Japan, but the day before the G7, the World Economic Forum is hosting public-private forum in the same place, and we would love to have you there. We would love to hear your voice, your input. So when we trying to set up an international body and make an arrangement, we know we have heard your voice, and we would also like to have a multi-stakeholder panel in this body.
Mr. Jain, a concrete step you'd like to see happen from here?
I think I've already answered that too so many times. The way we want to move forward is basically democratization, creating open systems, creating collaborative framework based on principles. That will be the real way to go forward, plus getting digital literacy, skilling included, because we need to have inclusive society and the security concerns.
Kimberly.
Yes. The first thing I'd request is the two gentlemen here might have some influence on this. I'd love to see every country who's engaging in wind energy just go ahead and mandate that as a part of the bidding process, that data must be open for everyone to do their best work on for climate. Force you to open up from your company. Please take action to say, how else could we participate in sharing that would have multiple benefits across the board? Take an active posture, go beyond the forcing hand, and find out what else is there for good.
Now, it's been such a fulsome discussion. We have run over a little bit. Are there any pressing questions, though, from anyone before we wrap up? Feel free to pop your hand up if there is something you wanted to ask quickly.
I have a question to Mr. Connor. How much do you want to see achieved in G7? You talked about free flow of trade with trust. And I have a question to Secretary Jain. What kind of policy coordination will be doing for G7, G20? And because in G20 you have an authoritarian regime that Mr. Connor has mentioned about. What kind of achievement can you see in G20 as well?
We may have to keep it super brief, so.
Okay, well, we would like to get endorsement and participation of a G7 country for building a new body for data regime, and we wanted to start operationalizing it.
Mr. Jain.
I think when we want to come to a conclusion, when you have differing views, I always say start from this end or this end. Two of us, either I convince you or you convince me, or two of us agree to a third solution. So it's a basically engaging with the stakeholders. So that is the strength of sitting together and collaborative. So I'm sure with Excellency Taro, I agree with him that we need to continue to discuss it, and I'm sure the countries will come together and create this framework.
Minister Kono, Kimberly, Mr. Jain and Shamina, thank you very much. But let me just toss over now to Supheakmungkol Sarin, who is the head of data and artificial intelligence ecosystems at the World Economic Forum, for conclusion.
Thank you so much, Karen, for a fantastic panel. And thank you to all the panelists for your great contribution. We hear a lot of great ideas. We hear a lot of good success story from different countries and from different sectors. And I am really confident that with the leadership of Japan and India this year in G7 and G20, I think we'll be able to achieve concrete result toward sustainable development that is for the benefit of humanity and our planet. At the forum, our data policy platform has an initiative that is focusing on building new approaches to achieving sustainable development. So we welcome all your active contribution toward that. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you so much. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Minister. Appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very nice meeting.